So this next story is fascinating. I didn't buy it initially. I thought it was a bunch of rumors and innuendo. It appears to be a real bombshell. So, Tom Brady's the most detailed professional athlete of anybody's life, my life, your life. So when he retired and then unretired, it made no sense. And then Bruce Arians, who never showed any inclination to work upstairs in a cubicle in the front office, was moved upstairs. Ben Volin, Boston Globe, detailing this wild story and what really happened. And we told you, Joy is my witness, we told you, I can't wait for the story behind the story because I don't buy any of this PR nonsense where Brady returns after retiring and, Bruce Arians, Instagram, I love you, nonsense. And the Bruce Arians, I was going to retire anyway. Now we know the rest of the story. Essentially, Brady has had a relationship for 20 years with Sean Payton, the coach of the Saints, former coach of the Saints. They have the same agent, a guy I know and like a lot, Don Yee. They were going to go to Miami, and Brady was going to be part owner. He would only go if he got a legitimate veteran coach, and it was going to be Sean Payton. And then the Brian Flores situation happened, the lawsuit against the Dolphins and other teams, racial discrimination. Brady and Payton said, we're not going to go here now. It's just a mess. Remember, the owner of the Dolphins, Stephen Ross, is a Michigan alum and booster, and Brady went to Michigan, so they're close. So the story's true now. Rich Ohrnberger, who's a regular guest on our show, had tweeted, and now we know it's true, that Arians and Brady had their issues. It was not great. There was tumult and turbulence in the entire relationship, and Brady was ready to bolt. And here's a curveball that's been added. So when Brady in the Miami situation imploded, right? Brady suddenly, we all saw this, right? He was suddenly over at a English Premier League game, Manchester United. That was weird, right? We'd never seen him there in 20, 25 years. Oh, now we know why, according to Ben Vollen, Boston Globe. They're owned by the Glazer family, who owns the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady flew over, met with the Glazer family. Listen, I'll come back. Here's the story, but you got to make a couple of changes upstairs. And suddenly Tom unretires and Bruce Arians moves upstairs virtually on the same day. We don't believe it was happenstance or coincidence because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do not believe in coincidences. For our Seattle listeners, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I don't wear tinfoil hats. But in this instance, you can put the things together now. We know it to be true. Is that Brady basically had a deal to go to the Miami Dolphins, like a Derek Jeter to the Marlins, be an owner, maybe quarterback for a year. Sean Payton comes over. They take it over. We know the Dolphins wanted to pivot to an offensive coach because they hired an offensive coach from the 49ers, and you and I know they would have hired Sean Payton before the young guy they hired from the 49ers with no head coaching experience. So it was all in the works. Then the lawsuit, and not a shock, the Dolphins screwed it up because the Dolphins screw everything up. And that's the way, I started talking about this 10 minutes ago. There's very few great owners, great executive front offices, great quarterbacks. In Seattle right now, you're dealing with Paul Allen passed. They don't draft well. Russell's gone. Good luck, Seahawks. So the story is out. It's official. And just be very careful about buying into PR nonsense. In this, once you have a Ronaldo, a Messi, once you have a Brady, a Russell Wilson, a LeBron, when you have somebody that big, the team will always take the hit. The star never does. That's the way it works. Why? Because you want to get a next star if that star's leaving. Right? If the Seahawks want the next great quarterback in free agency, they don't want to dog Russell Wilson, and other people go, look at that owner, look at that organization. They don't treat their athletes well. So it's all about brand protection for the Bradys and the LeBrons. Right? By the way, as the Lakers implode here, you know who's never around? LeBron. When David Blatt got fired by the Cavaliers years ago, LeBron's quote was, oh boy, I was surprised. Surprised by what? It happened today and not yesterday? You're the guy that ran him out. But Dan Gilbert knew he had to take the hit. He was not going to dump it on his star player because star players, especially in the NBA, have huge leverage with other star players. They couple up, they join forces. So we're getting more clarity now on this story. It is absolutely fascinating. And as we predicted, it's not that Arians and Brady are enemies. Nobody is suggesting that. Nobody's suggesting they shoved him upstairs, but they nudged him. That appears to be the case. And Ben Volin now joins us, Boston Globe. I mean, it's fascinating. I was watching you connect the dots today. It really does. What does it tell you about the power Brady has in Tampa? Well, what does it tell us?
Yeah, Colin, this is a story where truth is almost stranger than fiction. And what does this tell us is that on the masthead of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you have the Glazer family at the top, and then Tom Brady is number 2. And I think Tom Brady has more power there than the general manager, than the head coach. And whatever Tom Brady says goes in Tampa Bay. He is everything to that franchise. They were 7-9, hadn't made the playoffs in more than a decade. He shows up. He immediately wins them a championship. He brings Rob Gronkowski with him. Hey, you want Antonio Brown? Sure, we'll go get him. Now I think we're seeing a case where Brady probably preferred a switch at the top of the organization. I think he was ready to have Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich take control of the team and to have Bruce Arians perhaps move on to a different role in the organization. So Tom Brady, he's brought them thousands of season tickets. He's sold them thousands of jerseys. The Tampa Bay Bucks were a fairly irrelevant professional sports franchise until Tom Brady showed up. So he's the man in charge there.
It's really interesting. Belichick, older defensive side, Arians, older offensive side. And they're very different personalities. But in the end, Tom has always had sort of an aspirational view to remain young. The TB12 brand, youth. It comes in the form of avocado ice cream, and not my cup of tea. But it is interesting is what Brady has done with his last 2 moves, the Belichick departure and Arians. Could I not argue, Ben? It's like, guys, the league is changing, and you're dinosaurs. He's kind of saying, that's what it kind of feels like to me, Ben.
I would say Brady has certainly felt empowered the last few years and has seen how other athletes, certainly in other sports like the NBA and Major League Baseball, how these athletes have really been able to take control of their own careers and their own destinies instead of sitting back and just wherever you get drafted or wherever you have to be. That's, he's no longer just employee number 12. He's a brand and he's a mogul in a sense. And, you look at the NBA where these guys annually, the players are the ones running free agency. And I think you've seen that now coming to the NFL. And Brady, I think, correctly, rightly has been at the forefront of it. Who's bigger and more powerful and deserves to have more of a say at the table than Tom Brady? We saw it a few years ago with Jimmy Garoppolo here in New England. He kind of went over the coach, went to the owner, told him his issues, and they got Jimmy Garoppolo traded out of town. Brady made sure that he would reach free agency at the end of his Patriots contract. He didn't want the Patriots having any say over his future. He was able to completely detach and then able to choose the best situation for him and go to Tampa. And now I think we're seeing it again where he certainly, I think, had some influence in the decision to have Bruce Arians step aside and Todd Bowles assume the team. So, yeah, I think it is a new day of athlete empowerment, certainly at the top of each sport, and Tom Brady is driving that.
I got to ask you a Patriots question because I often compared Belichick to Greg Popovich. They're legends, perceived as the best coach in their respective sport, but as player empowerment has increased, their wins are decreasing because they fall in love with a system. And I do think systems and ways of doing business, stuff worked even 5 years ago. It doesn't today, whereas McVay is very pro-player, very pro-culture, willing to pivot literally off players and personnel very rapidly. I look at the Patriots today. They let J.C. Jackson go. Shaq Mason was becoming a star offensive lineman. From what we read, Belichick may call plays. There are virtually no stars. It's very much San Antonio with Popovich. He let Kawhi just go to Canada. There was some pettiness there, but in the end, he just wanted to coach who he wanted to coach. And I look at Belichick now, and he said that, Ben, like 3-4 years ago. I want to coach who I want to coach. And I think, well, sometimes you just got to coach guys who are great. Do you see and you're in the heart of Patriot fandom, but is there anybody there, I'm sure you would look at it and think, boy, Bill, this is not trending in the right direction. They couldn't force Josh Allen to punt one time in the last 2 games. I mean, where are they going right now? It's a starless football team.
Yeah, Colin, it's not all rainbows and unicorns for Bill Belichick this offseason. And you'd think a guy who's won 6 Super Bowls would consistently get the benefit of the doubt, but it's been a tough go for him the last couple of years since Brady has left town. Obviously, Brady wins in Tampa Bay, and the Patriots have been okay. They made the playoffs last year, but to your point, they got blown out by Buffalo. They're nowhere close to competing for a Super Bowl right now. And then you look at they're not doing anything in free agency this offseason. And then you look at, they lose Josh McDaniels, the coaching staff now. They don't have a single guy on staff who's ever been a quarterback's coach or an offensive coordinator or called a play. They're relying on Joe Judge, who until he was the Giants head coach, was a special teams guy for the Patriots. And Matt Patricia has been a defensive coach and an offensive lineman. And now all of a sudden he might be involved with, who knows? I mean, the Patriots obviously aren't very forthcoming with how the operation is going. So to me, Belichick is really just betting on himself. They're not making crazy moves in free agency. Devontae Parker was a nice move. I actually kind of like bringing back Malcolm Butler. We'll see how that one unfolds. But they don't have a very experienced coaching staff as far as putting guys around Mac Jones right now. They didn't add players in free agency. And it's really Belichick, to your point, saying, with my system, another year together, I've developed these guys as good coaches. It doesn't matter what position they're coaching. Mac Jones, he's going to be in his second year. Belichick is really, I think, placing a heavy bet on himself this year that he alone in his system can get the Patriots back to being championship caliber. It doesn't look that way on paper.
No.
But Belichick's making that bet right now.
Yeah, and that's the bet Popovich has made, and he's in a play-in game. So Ben Volin, Boston Globe, read his stuff. Fascinating article today unveiled about the Brady, Dolphin, Sean Payton situation. For the record, in all your reporting, I think Joy and I said this last week, I think Sean Payton is just sitting in the weeds. This is why, even though he appears to be a very strong broadcasting candidate, nobody's really announced a broadcasting plan for him because Sean deep down knows I needed a year off. The Saints, obviously, we peaked. The broadcasting will pay me some money. I think Peyton's going right back into the league, and like a Phil Jackson, he's going to cherry pick the organization that has a quarterback, somebody he can ride with. Like I said last week, I think Brandon Staley's a smart guy. If they don't get to the playoffs again with Justin Herbert in the Los Angeles market, you may have to make a move there. Any inclination about Sean Payton going forward? Because very rarely do we have a Hall of Fame coach on the market with 10 great years left.
I think you hit it on the nose. Sean Payton, when he stepped down, at his going away press conference, even said, yeah, I plan to coach again and maybe pretty soon. And that to me that struck me as odd because rarely in a stepping down retirement type of press conference does the guy then admit that he's going to be joining another team in a year or two.
Yeah.
But obviously he's meant everything to the Saints and I think was probably just ready for a new challenge. And not to mention, as you said, they don't have a quarterback there, and I think we've seen this offseason how hard it can be to land these guys sometimes. Yeah. So I just don't think he wanted to go through that.
Yeah.
And yes, I do think he'll be back soon, and I do think the quarterback will be number one as far as the factor to determine which team he was going to join, and that's why he was going to go to Miami, potentially because some guy named Tom Brady was probably going to eventually, I don't know about this year, but eventually Tom Brady was probably going to come out of retirement and quarterback for the Dolphins. When Brady joined the Bucs, he almost joined the Saints and Sean Payton then, but Drew Brees decided to come back for one more year.
Yes.
So they would have connected a couple of years ago, if not for Drew Brees kind of messing the whole thing.
By the way, is Brady to Miami off the table after this year?
I can't tell you for sure. To me, the key is, so Brady clearly has to get a pay raise from the Buccaneers. He's on the books for $10 million plus $4 million in incentives. It's the deal of the century. So they've got to give him a pay raise. If it's just a pay raise and it's no years, obviously he's angling to get out of Tampa after this year. But if they add extra years to the contract, then I think that's actually a pretty good sign that the Glazer family said, look, as long as you are going to play, we want it to be in a Buccaneers uniform. So I don't know if the Dolphins thing is still alive. To me, the contract extension or whatever contract Brady does get from the Bucs, that will be very telling.
Good stuff. Ben Volin, Boston Globe. Appreciate you stopping by on a busy Monday for you. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, Colin.